architecture, one of the selling points of runtime, and there are many, is that regardless of what platform you want to build on, there's a runtime probably for that platform. And underneath the covers, they all work the same because they're all building off the same code base down underneath. So almost all of the functionality, except for things that are built upon the SDK's needs, like if there's something particular about that particular SDK that it needs some particular data structure that's common for developers who use that. Otherwise, it's the same across all of the SDKs. For the people that have been here before to Developer Summit, I'd be interested to know why you came back. I know that sounds like a silly question, but what value do you get out of the Developer Summit when you come here? Because that's the sort of thing we want to deliver to our folks so they do keep coming back. Anyone have any comments about that? Yes, sir?
Being able to talk to the developers and builders in the Solution Center and be like, hey, this is my pain point that I'm currently on that you guys haven't even considered yet, and explain that and ask for a feature or ask for something fixed or improved or something like that.
That's good. That's good because I
Connections and stuff.
Yeah, sometimes it's really good to, for us on our end, to know the end-to-end workflows. Because we just see issues coming through and feel like what's going on. Like we don't know the entire workflow, so it's very good to get that understanding. So it's a great benefit to share that.
It is. It gives us a broader view of what we should be working on and how things should fit together better than they do.
For me coming out, it's to see in depth what's coming, what's new coming out, and help me when we have customers come out, what's possible, what's coming up available for them to be able to give new customers, give customers new things.
Right.
Technology is catching up a good bit to be able to do things we've always wanted to do that were kind of either impossible or hard to do. But now it's getting easier and easier.
So when you were at the plenary, did you watch the plenary?
Mm-hmm.
What was the thing that popped out to you most at the plenary of new things that have come out?
It's too many. Too many to name more.
It was a bit of a fire hose, wasn't it?
Yeah.
And it's so much stuff that I think you had mentioned this too, that it becomes overwhelming. It's like, just slow down a little bit and let me assimilate what you're throwing at me. They are so excited about sharing. The people on the plenary stage are so excited about sharing and getting everything out there, and they've only got this much time to do it in, and they've got all this stuff they've been working on for a year, and they just gotta get it out there, But after a while, you just kind of, for me, I just kind of shut down and say, okay, I'm just gonna watch what's going on, and I'll go back and watch a recording later because I can't really assimilate all of this stuff across all the different developer platforms that we have.
Feedback on that real quick.
Yes.
I think it would have been useful as they were doing their individual presentations at the end, they could have said, and these are the sessions that we can dive further into this.
Mm-hmm. That's a good idea. That's a really good idea. Have a session, have them talk about what sessions to go to for more information, more details.
Yeah.
And maybe they at that point can kind of back off the details that they're trying to provide here, knowing that people that are
walking away, just take a picture of it.
Yeah. One other thing I'm interested in too, this is my own selfish side of it, I'm also responsible for the documentation for Runtime, the guide documentation, the API documentation, and my team works on that. If you have comments, good or bad or indifferent about these things, please come and see me at the showcase today or tomorrow. I'd love to hear feedback about that. We're not going to get into that here because that's not really the point of this session, but that's really important to me. And also, I want to encourage you, and I'll encourage you again before this is all over. How many people have used GeoNet? Have logged into GeoNet and actually, okay, that's good, about a third of you. How many of you people have actually asked a question or made a comment? Okay, that's great, that's excellent. Yeah, GeoNet is growing pretty quickly. And it's one of the, I have a RSS feed built into Slack, so every time someone puts a question in about Docker Qt, I get something in my Slack channel about those questions. And so that's really good feedback for us.
Our entire team does that, so someone will answer your question. Focus on
Your microphone.
that's just
Okay, great.
Battery's kind of low.
Oh, it is. All right, is it time to start? I think we should just go ahead and start now. Thank you all for coming. So my name's Thomas Dunn, and I'm a product engineer and have been for about 5.5 years on the Runtime team. I work on the Qt SDK. I also work on documentation, as I mentioned. And this is my good friend and cohort, Kaushik Hajra. He also works on the Qt SDK team for Runtime, and as well as some other duties that he has. And we've been on the Runtime team together working on Qt for quite some time, back in before the App Studio days came along. Has anyone used App Studio, by the way? Okay, so App Studio is built on top of this SDK. So if you're doing App Studio work and you're a developer and you get to the point where you want to move beyond App Studio and maybe extend it a little bit, this is the SDK you want to use. So that's something I want to make a point about. Before we get started, I want to really drive home the point that the Qt framework and the ArcGIS Runtime SDK is really a cross-platform development system. So I want to hand this over to Kaushik for just a moment. Kaushik?
All right, good morning, everyone. Thank you, Thomas. So you heard Ewan talk about the need for being offline in a lot of cases, right? So, and that kind of drove me to, that's kind of the idea we all think about in Runtime. A lot of people have offline use cases. So that drove me to create an app for this demo that works in truly completely offline mode. I'm going to talk about what are the technologies I use to create that app, and I built it with Runtime Qt. So, it works. I wrote it only once, works across all the platforms. So I'm going to show it on iOS pretty quickly. And can you switch it to 1? Yeah. So here's the app. You can actually see I'm in airplane mode. So what I have here is a base map of California. I got that from an MMPK. I sideloaded it onto my device. And there are some red dots that you see. What are those red dots? Those are actually some points of interest for me, for this app especially. I'm like an outdoors person. I go outdoors a lot of places. And a lot of times I don't have cell phone signal. So I need my mapping or my routing to work in completely offline mode. So these points, what you see, are actually fall color locations in California. So, in California, fall colors are not that pervasive. So I need to know where the fall colors are. And a lot of times if I'm out deep in some woods, there is no signal, absolutely nothing. So I followed this website and I downloaded a KML file for fall colors in California. And this is the KML file that I'm using as my points of interest. So I have the base map and I load the KML file on top of it. And then what I did is I just used some filtering capabilities so where I can find all the place marks, those red dots. So let's say I want to go to Burney Falls. It finds Burney Falls and zooms to that area. And then from there, I want to go to, let's say, Manzanita Lake or something. So I can go there. Once I'm done, once I click it, so it gives me all the route directions and, the route. So I can add even voice to it if I wanted to, but this is just for a demo. So you can see how I created an app in completely offline mode by sideloading my data, and I built it I wrote it only once. I just had to compile it for the different platforms. And today we are going to show you how you can build an app like this using our SDK, different components of our SDK. With that, back to you.
Thanks, Kaushik. So our agenda for today, again, I want to emphasize that this is an introductory session. So if you've been to the intro session before, you're going to see some things that you've seen before, and you're going to see some things later that you haven't seen before, such as things that are coming new in our release, which is coming at the end of this month. Hopefully it makes it by the end of the month because I want to go on vacation after that. We'll talk about how app design fits in with both Qt's framework provided by the Qt company and our SDK that was built to work with it. And we're going to talk a fair amount about SDK resources that are available to you as you develop applications with our SDK. So what is Qt? If you're here, you may already know what Qt is. You might not. But as I mentioned earlier in our discussion, Qt was developed about, 24, 25 years ago or so as a cross-platform development for mobile devices. And it's grown over the years to do all sorts of things. It does mobile devices, it does embedded devices, it does desktop devices, where you can write a piece of code in C++ or QML, and we'll talk about QML in a moment, and just build it for whatever platform you want. And it compiles it down to the actual machine code. This is not an interpreter, this is not a virtual machine, this is actually compiled to the metal performance. And that's what we really refer to when we're talking about a native app. It's not a web app, it's actually as if you had written an app directly for that device, and you're gonna get that sort of performance out of it. It has a lot of cross-platform high-level libraries and abstractions. One of my favorite ones I saw yesterday was, we were playing around with this on the island as we were getting the showcase. They have a new one for voice, for example. So you can just say Qt.voice, and you can give it a text string. And after you've configured it to whether you want it male or female or child and how fast and what the pitch and everything should be, just give it text and boom. Whatever device you're on, it's doing text to voice. That's the sort of high level.
For the demo that I just had, you could just add voice for every turn of your route, and that would just speak out whatever is written out there. So yeah.
So what does that translate into you for you as a developer? That's a lot of code you don't have to write, and that's amazing. So Qt is a wonderful platform in and of itself. I'm not here, I don't work for Qt, but I really do enjoy working with it. It's actually the source code for most of it, not all of it, because it's a commercial product, but it also has an open source aspect to it. Code is available for downloading and looking at yourself. So I think the reasons you'd want to use the Qt framework are pretty obvious. You want to get your product out there in a hurry. You don't want to write a bunch of stuff somebody else has already written for you. You want to do it across multiple devices. So when App Studio was developed, it was written on top of this for the specific reason that the App Studio folks can build their template applications and then have them build across the 5 platforms that our SDK supports. And they're actually doing that in an automated fashion through the cloud to build those things. So it fits well into that environment. So the platforms we support are Windows. This is on, by the way, this is on the Qt SDK. We support Windows, Linux, Mac OS, iOS, and Android. Qt actually...
And embedded.
Oh yes, and Linux embedded. That's a new thing. That was shown on the plenary stage as well, running on that Jetson device. That's just what we support with our SDK. Qt actually supports a whole bunch of other things as well. So let's turn the focus away from the Qt company for a moment and that lovely tool, and let's talk about what we did with it. So we built an SDK that provides the runtime functionality in a form that Qt developers can access that. And they can access it by writing C++ code, or they can access it by writing QML code. How many people do not know what QML is? Okay, great. QML is an interesting thing. I'll describe it to you in detail in a minute. I think you're really going to like it. If you need to write a map, put a map in your app, and you want to put a dot where the pizza place is closest to you, there's a lot of APIs out there you can use for that. But if you know anything about the ArcGIS platform, and people that have been coming to these sessions or these summits for a while do know about that, there's a lot more you can do with GIS, and that's what our runtime is all about. For example, analysis. You can take layers of data and overlay them, and you can do geographic topological operations against those things to answer questions. You can work connected, disconnected, partially connected. You can, the reason runtime was originally developed was for its high performance graphics display, because there was a real desire in the community, even though GIS itself had nice graphics displays on our desktop products and that sort of thing, some people really wanted to push the envelope of what the hardware is capable of doing, and that was one of the key points why runtime was built to begin with. It's very, very fast. It uses the graphics hardware that's on the devices, so it's pretty stunning. There's customizable symbology, so if you're into customized symbology for like military purposes, we support all of that. We support a ton of various data formats, including a lot of raster formats are supported inside of Runtime. And because it is built to work with the ArcGIS platform, all of that heavy lifting stuff that's inside the ArcGIS platform and server and in desktop and ArcObjects and all of that other stuff that's in the rest of the platform, this interfaces with that. It either mimics it, shares it, or communicates with it and has it do some of the work with it through services and that sort of thing. So it's really tightly integrated with the platform. So yeah, you can make a closest pizza place app if you wanted to with this, which is just fine, but we can do a heck of a lot more than that. So, you're ready to get started. What would you do? First, go to the Qt company and download the Qt framework. And after you get that installed, go log into ArcGIS for developers using your developer subscription, which by the way is no cost, just go create one and download it. And then download the Runtime SDK for Qt, and then run the installer and the post installer, which we're going to have a demo of a little bit of that, the part that might be a little tricky to understand, and we're going to show that to you here in a moment. And once you're there, you can develop applications, prototype applications or real applications, many without cost. And you can use different levels of functionality depending on what licensing you use, and licensing we'll talk about toward the end. But while you're developing as a developer, you get a little watermark on the map, you get a little nag thing in the console, but the rest, all the functionality is available to you to experiment with and play with and learn how to use the platform without limitation. All right, Koshik, you want to talk about the installation process a bit?
Yeah, thanks. Okay, now that you guys are fully convinced that Qt is what you need to use, I'm going to show you where you start. So the first place, as Thomas mentioned, is you go to the Qt website, which is qt.io, and create an account there and download all the Qt framework binaries, all the cross-platform binaries that you need in order to talk to the OS events and all things like that. So once you're done with that, go to developers.arcgis.com and sign up for a developer account there. And that gives you access to all the runtime binaries and the doc and API reference and all of that. So I've already, let's say, signed in, I've created an account, I've signed in, and here is the link on the developers page to download the SDK, and then once you download, to install the SDK, the guide doc. So if you go here, so this is basically all the guide docs for installation. So let's say I'm on Mac OS here. I click on install on Mac OS and gives me all the system requirements, all the dependencies. We have laid down, made lots of effort to lay down all the details of the things that you need. So if you find anything is missing or things that we should be putting out there, please let us know. But we use it internally for onboarding people, so we've gone through it, iterated over it multiple times to make sure we've covered everything. So I've gone through this process and I've installed the SDK for sake of time. And once you're done with the installation, it'll prompt you to run a tool called Post Installer. So what is the Post Installer? It's basically just a tool. What it does is you have your IDE, which is Qt Creator, and it binds the Qt Creator with our binaries and the Qt framework binaries. So what we put the doc in the right place so that you have context sensitive help. As you're developing, you click on some item and press F1, you get the help right away in the IDE. Also, we put some starter templates for you so that you can get started. So let's walk through it real quick. So this is the welcome screen, and then here I'm going to select two components, Qt Creator and macOS. So why do we need to tell the post installer where my Qt Creator or my macOS QMake is? The reason for that is we need to know where your Qt installation is on your disk so that we can put the stuff in the right place. So I'm going to browse to my Qt Creator location on disk. So I'm using Qt 512, so I'm going to select Qt Creator And then I'm going to go back to my 512. That's the Qt version. And I'm going to use Clang, which is my compiler here. And I'm going to select that QMake. And I click on install. So it goes and does all of that work. Once I click on done, and if I open up Qt Creator and go to File, New Project, you see that there is a new template here called ArcGIS, a project type called ArcGIS, and you get 3 different templates that are installed with it. So why do we have 3 different templates, Thomas?
That's a good question. Well, the 3 different templates correspond to the 3 different app patterns that you use when you build an application using our SDK. Now, keep up with me here because these are not quite listed in order. I'm going to talk about the bottom one first, and that is the oldest one. That's C++, writing C++ business logic, and using C++ to build your UI. They have this package called widgets. You can tell by the name that it's probably has a long history, and it does. And in that, you create objects in C++ to create rectangles, and you create boxes and buttons and radio and all that stuff, right? So you can build up your UI completely with C++ right alongside your business logic. And that's the way it was done for many years. Then QML and Qt came along. Part of QML is Qt, which is a very fast declarative UI building tool. And it was designed to let you put together a UI very quickly by putting things inside of things in kind of a JSON-esque way of doing things, where things are nested inside. So maybe I have a rectangle, and inside that rectangle there's a mouse area, and there's also a button or 2, and all that stuff you do by just specifying these things inside of this list. Now, you can use Qt right along with C++ and use our C++ API to write your business logic in C++, but use Qt for the front end. And that's the way most people write applications, Qt applications, not just our applications, but Qt applications. They'll use C++ for their business logic, and they'll use Qt for their UI. And that's a good way to go because it's very flexible and it works across every platform that we support, all of the mobile devices as well as the desktop devices. Another option you have is to write it all in QML, because in addition to adding classes to C++, to our C++ library to encapsulate all of these classes that make up runtime core and runtime functionality, we also did that with QML. In QML, a class is known as a type, and we built types in parallel. So almost every place there's a C++ class, there's a QML type. So you can actually declare whole applications with QML in this nesting way of building things. And by declaring that I have a geodatabase, and that geodatabase's source file is this, and inside that geodatabase, there's a list of feature classes, and I want to be able to access feature class XYZ. All that can be done in a declarative way, and you can write still procedural code, but when you do, you're writing it in JavaScript. You're not writing it in C++. So if you're a person who's coming from a JavaScript web development background, and you want to try out QML, or you want to try out runtime and build native applications, this is a great gateway for you. But again, the most commonly used pattern is to write C++ in the background with QML front end. But either way works really nicely. So the QML API, as I mentioned, we took the runtime core functionality. Is anyone not familiar with what runtime core is when I'm mentioning that? Anybody? Okay, great. So we took the runtime core and we wrapped it in a thin layer, which is our implementation layer for Qt. And then on top of that, we built 2 APIs, one for C++ and one for QML. And they do the same things, they just do it through a different way of interfacing through the language. As you can see on this picture here, we have a map view, and inside the map view we have a map, and inside that map we have a base map, which is a vector street map, and then inside of that, inside the map we also have a feature layer, and it's coming from a service feature table, which is a table that's on some service you've connected to with a URL. I didn't list the URL here, but you get the idea. You actually build things up like blocks and put things together in the way you want them. And then say, for example, you also created a UI portion here. You had a button, then you can have on-click events, and you can handle those things and write JavaScript code for that. He's going to show you all this in just a minute. So this is just a brief overview, so bear with me for a moment. Now let's compare that to the C++ API. Same thing, except this time, instead of wrapping them up in these types of QML, we've wrapped them up in C++. So with C++, it's really flexible because especially if you've already got a C++ shop and you've got C++ mapping capabilities you want to add to your C++ application, this is really a good way to go. Also, if you're using local server, if you are using local server, you'll know what I'm talking about. You need to use the C++ API because the interfaces into ArcGIS local server only work through the C++ API. And if you want to know more about that, we can talk afterwards about what that means. If you need help in choosing, go to the guide. And in the guide, there's a topic called Qt SDK Best Practices. And that will give you all the decision points it takes to decide which way do I want to go when I build my application. So with that, I'm going to hand it over to Kaushik again, and he's going to walk through those various templates that correspond to these different application patterns. Kaushik?
Thank you. So in the last demo we installed 3 different templates that correspond directly to these 3 app patterns that that Thomas just talked about, right? So that was our first step in trying to build a larger application. So now let's walk through those templates and see what you get out of the box. So the first one is Qt Widgets, which is a classic desktop style application supported only on desktop platforms, so Windows, Mac, and Linux. Of course, it's not supported on mobile, so all your backend code is in C++ and your UI code is all like widgets UI files. You can select that. Once I go to next, it's asking me for like the name of my project and where do I create it. I'm just going to select the defaults and click on continue. Now this is where it asks me for the kits that I want to select. Now kit is, in Qt there is this concept of kits. A kit is nothing but just a combination of the compiler. So what compiler I'm using, and that depends on my target platform. In this case, I am using Mac, so I'm using the Clang compiler. On Windows, I'll probably use Visual Studio. And if I want to target iOS or something, I'll use, again, the Clang iOS compiler and GCC for Android. But in this case, for widgets, it is only supported on Windows, so I don't see any of the mobile platforms. So I select desktop and I go to next, I just select all the defaults, and you can see like all my code here is in C++. So here's a map view, here's a map that creates a new map, add the base map type to it, and then in the map view I set the map, and this is the map I set for that map view. And if I'm just going to run it, it's going to build. And I have a fully functional map. How many lines of code did I write? 0. So out of the box, we provide the functionality to get you started with just a basic map. Now you can start adding components to it. So that was the widgets type. Let's show you the next type, which is pretty similar, except that your UI would be in QML. So again, I'm going to select the defaults here. And now you start seeing a lot more kits. Why is that? Because I just mentioned to you before that, this is not widgets. This is your UI is going to be in QML. So now it's supported even on mobile platforms. That's why you start seeing like these Android kits pop up and the iOS kits starting to pop up. Because I have configured this Mac. And for iOS, obviously you need a Mac. But for Android, you can build from Windows, Linux, or Mac. So in this case, I do have my Android bits as well. So I'm still going to select just desktop, and I'm quickly going to go to what I want to show you. So now what you see is my map view is actually a QML component. But that's all I see. I don't see the map or anything because those objects are still in C++. Now if I want to add a button here, if I really want, let's say I add a button here, and I'm not going to give it a name or anything. If I want to add a handler for this on-clicked event, where would that handler be? That would be in my C++ file. So if you go to sources, you have an untitled1.cpp. And this is where you see, this is where the map view was created, but we just imported into my QML through some import logic that you'll learn that once you start using it. And here is my map that's added to the map view. So my handler for that on-click button would actually be here. So I would have to, if I go to the header file, so I'll have to create a Q invocable function, and that is the function that I would call from a QML. For the sake of time, I need to rush through because we have a lot to show you. So I'm not going to show you, but we have a ton of samples, more than hundreds of samples that use this pattern, and you can go through them, see how we do it. Let me show you how we do the next one. Oh, if I build and run now, I'll get the exact same map. There you go, there was my button. It doesn't do anything right now, but you saw that's how it was. Now if I go to the last template type, which is QML, now this is where you write everything. We have these, all the ArcGIS components are still in QML, and your logical code will be in JavaScript. So again, I'm going to flip through the defaults. Again, you're going to see all the supported platforms here because QML is fully supported on all platforms. And now, when I show you, my map view is in QML. This is a map view object. We call, in QML, they're called types. And it's declaring an anchor, just like you do in CSS. Like, it's saying, just fill my parent. And then within my map view, there is a map. And the map has a base map. I can change that topographic to something else. You have full intelligence. If I say like I want imagery or something, you can do that. And if I run it now, this is my fully functional map again. Now if I want to add a button to this guy, so I can just do that. I can give it a text saying click, and on click, now let's say I add a console message. If anybody has used JavaScript, you know that now you're in complete JavaScript territory because it's saying, console.log is a JavaScript function. So let's say, I'll just say clicked. Now if I run it, there's my button. Once I click, if I go back to my Cube Creator, I see that message. Can I interact with my map? Sure, I can. I just have to give my map an ID, and that's the handler for the map. That's the object handler. So I can say map.operationLayers.count. So it'll just tell me how many layers are in the map. It'll be 0 because there are no operation layers. There's only a base map. So once I click, go back here, I see print 0. So I can interact with the map. But all of this code is now JavaScript code. So in the next demo, we're going to show you how we can use different SDK components to start building on it. My demo is built completely with QML, and I'll have some of the UI parts already done, and I'm going to use some of the components from SDK to start building up on it. Back to Thomas.
Okay, so let's stop and take a breath for just a moment. That was a lot of stuff we went through in a hurry. And although it was a very simple application, there were a lot of topics that we just rushed through in a hurry there. We talked about the concept of a map view, and then a map view contains a map, and there are reasons that it's built that way. And then there's also the concept of these different templates and how they relate to the different types of app patterns. There's what is this QML thing now, and what can I really do with this? It seems awfully simplistic, but it's not. So we don't expect you to come away from this session knowing immediately how to run this, but what I really do want to drive home is, first, if you have questions about what you're seeing in this session, come and see us at the showcase. I'll be there today and tomorrow. Kaushik will be there today. Are you here tomorrow as well?
Yes.
Okay, so we'll be there to answer questions today as well. So if you want to see how these demo apps work, if you want to do it for yourself, you want to experience that, come and see us at the showcase. We'd be happy to walk you through that. But there's also, once you leave and go home and you're wondering, what did I just see and how much of this do I remember? There's a place to go, and that's developers.arcgis.com. And you can have an API the best API in the world is not worth a thing if you don't know how to use it and you don't have the support to use it. So we provide API references, we provide conceptual guide documentation to give you the big picture of how things work. We provide you with, as he said, a lot of samples, and there's a lot of samples. Toolkit components, we have tutorials that are out there that you can use and walk through. There's little 10 to 15 minute tutorials to say, I need to know how to put a route on a map from point A to point B. How do I do that? You can sit down and write the code to do that in 15 minutes and see the results right on your screen. And then there's GeoNet. I can't emphasize enough how important community is to developers. You all know that. You need to have people you can ask questions of. And you need to have places to share your ideas and places to share your experiences. On GeoNet, not only is there forums there, but there's you can do your own blog postings there, read other people's blog postings, communicate with other users. It's a really nice community setup that you can go in and take advantage of. We're going to do a demo now where Kaushik's going to use some of these bits and pieces to work on that app that he showed you at the beginning about going to see winter or fall colors. And then we'll come back and I'll show you some more things that he's not going to touch. So back to you, Kaushik.
All right. So we saw, the 3 templates, and we saw what each template type does, right? So I'm going to kind of build up on the QML template, which was the last one that I showed. And you can see all my code here is in QML. So for that app that you saw earlier that was running on iOS, I have it built on Android as well. It runs on Android. I can show it to you later on after I'm done with all of this. And now I'm going to run it on my Mac. So my target platform at this point is Mac. So some of the things that I told you earlier I used was a mobile map package, remember? And how did I use that? So here's my mobile map package. I gave it an ID. This is my handle for that object if I want to access it later on anytime in this project. So I told you that I also sideloaded it on my device. Yes, so I just gave it a local base path. So I declared that right at the top. And again, it doesn't matter where it is on, so we know some known locations on each device. So if you put that in there and, for example, if I show that to you, so here is my known location. So we have something called system in one of the toolkit components called extras. So our extras, we normalize your system user home path. So it doesn't matter what your operating system is, we will figure out the home path for that operating system. And if you put some data there, we're going to read from there. So that's where I put all the data for every single device. I mean, I know where the home path is. I just go and put the data there and it just works. So that was my mobile map package. So what do I do with the mobile map package? Once I add it to the map, it loads, and I told you that I need a network data set. So once it loads, I need the route task from it. So I have a route task in it, and I set the transportation network data set for that route task from that mobile map package. I also used a KML layer, remember? Those were my red dots. So KML is something new that we released in 100.4. So again, for that KML, I'm creating that KML from a KML data set. And again, for that URL of the data set, I'm using a local path. So I'm just giving it the path of where my KML file sits on disk for that platform. And once that loads, I do some setups just to set everything up, have my structures in memory. So once I run this, and it takes some time to load because there are about almost 400 points in that. So there you go. So these are all the KML, the points that are coming from the KML. And here is my MMPK, that, the map that you see in the background. Now, if I start searching for something, the same search that I did earlier, let's say Burnley Falls and Manzanita Lake. Now, when I click on this route, I'm clicking, but nothing is happening. Why? Because that's the piece that I'm going to show you how I can complete using our samples, which is an SDK component. So When do I need to do the routing? When I'm clicking on that button, right? So let's see if we have a sample that does routing. So here is our QML sample app. It has tons of samples and we have a search. So if I start searching for route, there is a find a route sample. So this might work for me. And when I solve route, you see that it is actually routing between just 2 points, which is very similar to what I need, and it shows me the route directions. So what can I do with it? I can go here and I can look at either the live sample, which is what I just did, or I can look at the source code. I can also look at the description to see what the sample does. I can go to the API reference directly from the sample, but all I need is the source code. So I go to the source code and I look for when the routing is being done here. So as you can see, there is a mouse area. I wish I could, I don't know if you guys at the back can see the code, but you can always take a look at it later on. But I cannot zoom it. I've been kind of struggling to make the font bigger or something, but I cannot. But any case, so when that route button is clicked, I'm going to select all of that code right here. And go back to my Qt creator. And this is where I'm doing my routing. So I'm going to plug all of that code in right here. And make sure I've got all my braces and everything. I'm going to format it that way. I can see. Yeah, I think all the braces are in. Actually, there is something that's missing. No, it is defined. So I think I think I'm good. Oh, actually, you know what? There's a check that I didn't do. Yep, this check. So I'll just recopy it. I mean, it's not super important, but it's always good to check these things. Okay, so I'm all set up. Yep, my braces are all good. So if you look at the code, what do we have? We have route parameters. What is a route parameter? Route parameter is something on the route task, like we need some basic parameters for the route task. For example, do you need to return directions? Yes, I do. So I set it to true. And then what I do is I have a graphics overlay to draw my route once the routing is done. So I just clear that and clear all my existing stops. And I create 2 new stops based on the points that I selected. Again, you can see like you can dynamically create those stop objects, and I just give it a geometry. So once I find a place mark from the KML, I extract the geometry and I create those stops from those. So then in the route parameters, I set the stops. I just give an array of stops, and I could create multiple if I wanted to. But in this app, it's simplistic, so I just need to. So then I have a route task. I call the solve route on it, which is an asynchronous task. So do you think it's going to work? It is going to work, but it's not going to show me anything because I've not handled. I told you that solve route is an asynchronous task. So it goes and solves the route, but when it's done, I need to handle, right? So it is going to raise an event saying, well, I'm done. And then but I need to handle that part to say like what happens when it's done. So how do I handle that? So here's my route task. You know, you had already seen, like I'd set the transportation network data set from the MMPK. And this is where I need to handle. The solve route status changed is a signal that's kind of like an event in .NET, if anybody is used to .NET. That is a signal that's raised when the solve route is done. So once that task is completed, we need to do something with it. So that, again, I'm going to copy that part from my sample because the sample had a similar thing. So this is exactly what the sample is doing. Once the solve route status is completed, it's doing something. So I'm going to copy all of that code again and go back to my Qt creator and paste it here. And I'm going to format it. That. Hopefully it's formatted. Yeah. Now, Will it work? Let's see. I think it'll work.
Sure, it'll work. Absolutely. First time.
So there is some trickery here that I needed to do. I had to name the variables the same as the sample. So that's the secret that I just told you.
Yes.
So let's search for false. That's a neat lake. Sure enough, it worked. So you saw like how easy it was to actually build like almost a fully complete app using one sample. How did I get the code for KML? I got it from a KML sample. How did I get the code for mobile map package? I got it from a mobile map package sample. So a lot of the code I've just I've taken from samples, I've plugged them in here. It took me a day or so to create this app. So we want to see what kind of magic you can create with using these different components. That's it.
Okay, great, thank you. So yeah, he took some code and he pasted it in. Now we know that when you write your own code, you can have your own variable names and all of that, and you're gonna have to tweak that stuff. But the real point to take away from here is that most of the building blocks you need to build a GIS application, a standalone GIS application, someone has probably already solved the problem. It's just up to you to figure out how those pieces fit together for your particular application and what you need to do for your customers. Back to resources. So this is developers.arcgis.com. This is the opening page for it. I don't have it live here because I didn't want to have to do a bunch of navigation. But this is the front page. You'll notice down here at the bottom, there's this long list of hexagons down here. And right in the center, prominent, exactly where it should be, is the most important one, Qt. And if you click there, it's going to take you to the home page. But there are other things on this page too as well. You can have access to open source example applications. You can get access to tutorials and dev labs and things like that. You can also get to them, sorry?
Just wanted to point out that those example apps that he just talked about, they are fully functional apps. They're completely built. You just download and it just works out of the box.
Yes, that's great. So you can just go to the GitHub repo and you can download the whole sample and you can build it on your own platform and then go have fun with it. And where do you do that? Well, this is the landing page for our SDK. And up here, you can see QML and C samples. That's where you get to the sample pages. And so what you'll see on the web page is a list of all the samples that are being published on the web page. That isn't all of them. If you actually click on the link to go to GitHub, you can see all of the ones that are out there to be used. In fact, if you find a sample and you find a problem with it, you can submit a PR, a pull request, and submit changes to these things if you want to. It's all open source and we encourage you to join in. Other things that are on this page, which we saw earlier, was downloading the SDK, instructions for installing, what the release notes are of the particular release you're talking about, system requirements. And these are the tutorials over here. It's called Dev Labs in this page. They've just recently been renamed to tutorials because we know what Dev Labs means, but we realize a lot of people don't know what that means. We thought it was a great name. Tutorials, we just went with that. So beyond that, we also have this is an example of what the QML samples page looks like. And there's this long list down the left side about all the different categories of samples you go to. Please go have a look at those things. Now, do you have the sample viewer still available? I'd like Kaushik to show you a couple of the samples that we particularly like in here that are kind of flashy and fun to look at, but also the features of the sample viewer. So the sample viewer is an app that you can download right from the samples pages I just showed you, and it contains this whole block of samples as one application. You can download it onto your device, you can look at the source code, you can play with the live sample, you can get access to the API calls and the documentation for the API calls inside. So why don't you walk us through that just a little bit there, Kaushik?
Which one would you like to take a look?
Let's take a look at measurement, for example, under scenes. That's kind of a fun one.
Distance measurement analysis.
Right. So you may have seen some things like this. Imagine you're looking at a 3D scene. One of the difficulties is I want to measure a linear distance between, in this case, the top of a bridge and some point on the ground. How do you represent that to people so they can see how long this line really is? Well, you have to do it in a way, and you can see here with the with the right angle bridge-like thing we used here to show that what's being measured is not the right angle, but that orange and white dashed line, the distance. In a moment, that bridge
Yeah, the
standard is
Wi-Fi
going to
is
show up.
not really great
Yeah, it's
here,
not super
so-
fast at the moment. But in this sample, you're actually able to do measurement by giving 2 points in 3D. So that is X, Y, and elevation. And it'll do that calculation for you, and then it'll put it out for you either metric or standard. So that's a nice one to look at. Another one is viewshed with camera. That's one I particularly like. Again, I hope this one loads quickly because it's got a lot of stuff in the background. So in this case, you are looking at this scene. And the scene is the 3D view, is the scene, as opposed to a map, which is the 2D view. And in this scene, there's a bunch of 3D objects. And the way you're oriented in a scene is a concept of a camera. The camera is basically where your eyes are. So it has a position in space, where are your eyes, and which way are they facing? So that's the idea of a camera. So what he's done here is he brought up a camera, he brought up the initial viewpoint and got the view shed, and now he has then navigated away from the original point of the camera, which is right here at the apex of this. And now you can see where the camera was, and with the view shed, you can see what from that position could be seen and what could not be seen by that camera. And let's see. There's one more I wanted to look at too. Oh yeah, the QML one, the live QML one. So this one in QML, it says QML, I think is what it's called. There might be two of them. Not QML, KML, the live KML one. That's it. So in this case, we are going to a URL for NOAA, and we're getting weather warnings, and we're displaying them live onto a scene. And if you look at over here in the dashes on the side, up in here, in the menu, what can you see? Well, these are all the things you can see. You're looking at the live sample now. We've looked at the source code before. There's a description, which shows a snapshot of it, and then the description of what shows up on the web page if you were looking at this in the guide. And what else do we have up there in that menu? The API reference. So that takes you to the API reference. So you can, as you go through the source code and you have questions about that, you can go and look at the API reference. So that's really great. All right.
I want to change.
Yeah, I'm going to change now. Now for the question so many people have questions about and so few people seem to have answers about, and that is licensing. And that's because as developers, I don't like to cop out on things like this, but we leave this to our product managers to deal with. And that's because it changes over time. As you may have noticed, particularly in the last few weeks, we have made modifications to our licensing and pricing model that have made it cheaper in many cases, have introduced the idea of roles or personas, if you will, for types of users that correspond to the different levels of access you have to the functionality. So there's a lot of detail on this slide. I am not going to cover any of it, but I encourage you to go to our website and go to ArcGIS, developers.arcgis.com/licensing, and you will find this information, or come to the island and we'll put you in touch with someone who knows this stuff backward and forward. So that's all I'm going to say about licensing. So sorry if that's a cop-out. But this is interesting.
How does that fit into this?
Pardon?
How does the Qt license fit into this?
Yeah, I don't know what their current status is on Qt because it has also changed over time. So we need to talk to a product manager about that. What's coming? Well, this month, we hope it gets out in time for my vacation. This month, we have a new things that are coming out in Update 5, 100.5. And one of the ones that people really seem to have a lot of caring about is this one, subsurface navigation. So you saw a demonstration of this on the plenary stage where they showed the earthquakes. And instead of just showing them on the ground, they showed them underground, how many kilometers down they were and how big they were. And they were able to make the surface translucent and then dive right in and see that. That's actually being able to navigate that camera I talked about, that viewpoint underneath the surface and look at those things is new, coming in 100.5. There's a lot of performance improvements in 3D, support for WFS. They have these new raster tile packages and locators, which are faster and more compact, take up less space on your mobile device. There's a host of things that are coming in 100.5. I'm kind of moving ahead here a little bit because we've slightly run over time. But I want to encourage you, if you want to have a look at this, just go download the Qt framework, download our SDK or Qt SDK, get into the guide and read about some of the fundamentals. Understand what a map and a map view, a scene and a scene view, a layer, a table, and all those things mean. So as you start reading the API documentation and some of the more detailed guide documentation, you have those terms in your head. We also have an extensive essential terms library, which is part of the guide. So if you get hung up on a term, you can go in there and find out what we're talking about when we're talking about that. Grab those samples, download them, put them on your machine, compile them, run them, tweak them, play with them. Get familiar with how Qt Creator works and how those samples are put together. And please join the forum. Because if you're not already part of the forum and you want to be part of this community, it's really vital that you have this capability of coming and asking your peers questions, and sometimes we're on there too answering questions. It's not a substitute for tech support, but if you just have some basic questions about how things work, it's a great place to go. I also want to point out a couple of key runtime sessions that are happening later this week. The road ahead, of course, on Thursday. This is a big one because people talk about like what's 100.5. I talked about that a little bit, what was coming, but also what about 100.6 and all the others that are going to come after that. They'll talk about that to some extent inside the road ahead. Now, they don't want to make promises, obviously, but we have plans. We want you to know what those plans are, and that's what that session is about. And also this, everything you wanted to know about the runtime, there is a question and answer period on Friday from 10 to 11 a.m. If you haven't done so already, please download the Esri Events app, download this event into that app, and please give us some feedback. We really, really want your feedback. Not just that, but if you have time, and after you've had a chance to play with the runtime a bit, we'd like you to go to GeoNet and get in touch with us and let us know what was hard for you, what was easy for you, what you liked and disliked about it. Be honest and tell us what you think, because we're constantly on the lookout for ways to make our SDK better. I'm Thomas Dunn, and this is Kosik Hajra, and we'll be at the showcase today and tomorrow. And if you have any questions, come and see us. Thank you. Yeah, would anyone have any questions they'd like to make from the audience now?
We have time for questions.
I gotta walk in the back of the microphone because I want everyone to be able to hear, and I want the recording to be able to hear. Yes, sir.
Oh, I just wanted to ask you if you go down the QML path, are you limiting yourself in any way, overtaking the full C++ path?
You do have access to the full runtime stack in QML as much as you do in C++, so there is actually no limit. Yeah, so you can do pretty much everything.
The only exception is local server. We only have libraries to access local server from C++.
Yeah, I mean, if somebody doesn't need like extreme geoprocessing, which is mainly what local server is for, you're good.
Okay. Yes.
To develop apps for an iOS, do you need to compile it from a Mac, or can you do it from a Windows PC?
iOS, you cannot do it from a Windows box, unfortunately. You have to have a Mac. Yeah.
So on Windows, you can build for Android. On Mac, you can build for Android and iOS. And on Linux, you can build for Android, I believe, right?
Yes.
Yeah. Other questions?
Does this use CML or?
You can use CMake. So Qt started to support CMake. So we were looking at some projects internally to see if we can support CMake, but we haven't seen so much user demand and nobody has asked for us for CMake. So we're like, we'd rather focus our time on something that's more important. But if CMake's something important, we could have maybe like in the template, like a checkbox or something, use CMake instead of QMake. Yeah, so, but we are looking at it, yep.
So if I use Qt Creator to build an app on Mac, when I pull it down on Windows, I have to use Qt Creator, correct?
Yeah, so let's say, you build an app, your source code, all my source code, I just check it in GitHub or something, and then you go to your Windows box, you have Qt Creator, yes, you do need Qt Creator for Windows installed on that Windows machine, and then you download it and no change, it should just build and work. Yeah, you have to point it to the right compilers and everything. That part is just set up. Yeah.
Okay.
Your example used KML as data source. I'm assuming you could use other data sources, ArcGIS Online.
Yes, this was completely offline, but yes, I would have really liked to use an online KML data source. For example, like I could have said, on my route, how is weather affecting me or something, like, so I could pull like live weather data from NOAA or something, laid it over as another layer. And if that KML layer had live data source, I could have seen like, okay, well, along my route, if it's a long, like 5-6 hours drive, is there any bad weather along the route? So yes, you can.
Like parcels stored in ArcGIS Online.
Yeah, all of that, no problems.
Yes, sir.
If you're going to use QML, wouldn't you just use App Studio? It's just much easier to compile it and on any of the platforms and all that, and you don't have to worry about any of that other stuff.
That's a really good question.
Yeah, it really depends on your needs. So let's say you're building like just an end-to-end app. Yes, QML is perfectly fine for it. But let's say you're building something where you're integrating with something else. You cannot use App Studio for that. Now you have to use the API because you have to integrate it with other system. So
Yeah, you might be, for example, building a large dashboard application for like a weather reporting company or something like that, in which case that's completely custom, and we're able to, with our SDK, write those sorts of completely custom applications, while App Studio is really lovely for organizations that don't necessarily want to invest a lot of time in development, but they're really concentrating on their content, and they want a well-defined way of putting that content out there for people. And so it's really well designed because they have these template apps that you configure to just put your information into an established application. That said, you can extend those applications by using this API. But generally, I think people either use I don't know if this is true, but the sense of it for me is they either use the configured applications or they write a custom application. I don't know that there's that much customization of App Studio apps going on.
But they do provide lots of beautiful UI frameworks as part of the app framework. So they do a lot of stuff that they've built up. So yeah, there is some benefit. There's a lot of benefit in using App Studio. Yeah.
Let me get over here to you.
We're kind of a Visual Studio shop, and I'm also partial to CLion. So I was hoping maybe we could create CMake scripts and then port it over that way. But then you guys had a little point in the beginning of this where there's that post installation step where you link all your documentation in, which is really quite awesome. Is there a way that, like, say we wanted to go to Visual Studio?
Oh, I see.
And it was on us to go ahead and make that work. That's great.
Yeah, it's not that complicated. I mean, we just have an app to do that, but it's really like once you know your kit, like, and you know the locations where to put them, it's just like take those QCH. Well, our documentation. If you're doing in Visual Studio, you don't probably need it because those are QCH files. They're meant for Creator. So I don't know if Visual Studio can read QCH. I don't think they can.
So the QTH files are built by a tool that's provided by the Qt company to take HTML that you've already built and compress it into something that can be inserted. Now, if you wanted to replace that with something, it would build something that's suitable for insertion in Visual Studio. I don't know that they have anything like that.
Yeah, but they might. We just have not looked into it. I know Visual Studio Code has a lot of awesome plugins, but once we looked into it for Qt Creator, it didn't have full support, but had a little bit. So, like some IntelliSense would work, and sometimes it wouldn't. It was a little flaky, but I think somebody just built it.
Okay.
Yeah.
Any questions? Any other questions?
So as I had promised you, like here is the same app that's running on Android.
Yeah.
I just couldn't connect to this connector. For some reason, it's not projecting on the screen, but yeah, I didn't have to make any changes. And this app was about showing something about, fall colors. If somebody has a KML file that I could use to see spring bloom in California, I would like that.
So when you say sideload, what exactly do you use to do that?
For Android, I just used ADB. I just say ADB push, and then I just push the data, and then I give it the path.
But for iOS?
iOS, iTunes.
Really?
Yes.
Yeah, you go to iTunes, it's like you go to app settings, you find the application, and then there's a place for data, and you just drag it in there, basically.
Do we have time? We have 2 minutes? Let me quickly show you maybe. So there is one thing that you need to do, and that is in your iOS, there is a file called info.plist. And if you search for something called file sharing here, file sharing, you have to enable it to true. By default, it's false, which means file sharing is enabled in that app. And then you go to iTunes, and this is exactly what I did. My phone is right now not connected. Let's see if I can, real quick. That might just work.
Yeah.
Oh, to unlock it. Yeah, iOS has these nuances. Okay. Cancel, no, cancel. Now if I go to my phone and you see in file sharing, and there's my app and there's my data. So the way you do it is you open Finder and then drag, like say whatever data you need, just like drag that on there. That's it.
So you could drag a full file geodatabase over?
Yes.
And read it that way?
Yes, we do it all the time. I mean, there are ways to automate it. You can like have a file server running and you can have it like, download it from there. That'll work. So.
Slightly off topic question, maybe it's more of a pure Qt question or Qt question. What's the steps, and if it's too many, that's fine, to actually push something to the Apple Store? Is it super involved, or do you have to pull it back into like Xcode or?
You have to, yes. So it is, Apple, you have to go through all the standards that Apple has. Once you have a full-fledged app, I think you can request a submission. I have never done it, so I'm not quite sure, but you can ask the iOS guys or somebody from App Studio, they would know. But you have to submit it, and then they'll go through the approval process. If they have something, they'll let you know, and then you just iterate over it.
It's fairly straightforward. Once you
It shouldn't be, yeah. I don't think it's very complicated, though.
Yeah, the App Studio folks are right next to us, and the iOS folks are right next to us in the showcase. So we can just wrangle together the people you need to talk to, get the details.
Yeah.
All right, thanks for coming.
Thank you.